Hello, Nick Leifker here, and welcome to Week 3 of Management 409, Operations Management. With Week 3, we start looking at projects. Projects are really large, really expensive processes we do once. That's a quick way of thinking about it, because these are things that need to get done and hopefully need to generate value. But instead of, with processes, doing the same thing over and over and over again, what we do with projects is we have a huge, massively expensive, massively complicated task to get done once. For instance, building a building, that's a project. In many ways, your college education is a project. So, if we have this project, how do we get this done? How do we get it done on time? How do we get it done on budget? Well, what we generally use to examine projects is a nice little tool called PERT-CPM. Now, PERT-CPM, what it does is it looks at the relationship between the various tasks in a project. For instance, before you can start building the house, maybe you need to dig the foundation, dig out the ground so that you're able to pour the foundation and be able to lay the foundation, then actually start building it. So there's steps involved. Things have to occur in a certain order. So tasks have predecessors. And it's this relationship between predecessors and successors that forms the core of project management. So if tasks have to be done in a certain order, how will that ultimately affect how long it takes to get a project done? So what we use with PERT-CPM is it tells us what tasks need to occur and when, by looking at this relationship between predecessors and successors and how long each individual task in a project takes. Now, once we've looked at that, once we've looked at PERT-CPM, we can look at other things. For instance, one thing that we see with projects is that these tasks almost never have a defined time. In other words, it's almost impossible to say this task will take exactly 1 week or this task will take exactly 2 weeks. People don't think about tasks that way. Usually how people think of tasks is, well, it might take a week if things go well. It might take 5 weeks if things go really poorly, but in general, I expect it'll take 2 weeks. That's how people generally look at things to get done, right? Well, the beauty is that PERT-CPM can be adapted to that. We can adapt PERT-CPM to this idea of uncertainty so that we can find the mean project completion time, and also the probability of completing a project by a given deadline. And then one thing we'll look at toward the end of the chapter is this idea of crashing. Oftentimes, tasks have to be hurried. Oftentimes, projects have to be hurried in order to meet a certain deadline. Well, how do you do that? How do you do that by spending the least amount of time, or least amount of money? After all, if you're going to be throwing more resources at a project, resources cost money. So how do you hurry up a project? While spending the minimum amount of money you can. And so that is what we're going to look at toward the end of this particular chapter. Now, it's important to note when studying project management that there are a lot of steps involved. Study those steps. Be careful of them. For instance, with PERT-CPM with uncertainty, I think I listed somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 steps. And with PERT-CPM with crashing, what happened is there were 7 steps that I listed, but you end up having to perform several steps repeatedly, because what you end up doing is you end up changing the project and then having to evaluate the project again to see what to do next. So be careful. This is some tricky stuff, okay? So be careful, study hard, be well, and have a good week.